Well, here we are right in spooky season 2025. And some people really believe in ghosts and things that go bump in the night, and other people are skeptical. But it's hard to argue when the person who's having that haunted experience, Lamar, is someone you know and trust, isn't it? Don't you find it harder
Yes,
to like
it is.
prove
It's
that?
a lot more difficult. Yes, it is a lot more difficult.
Well, today's Oddcast, we're going to let Clayton, our listener, we're going to replay Clayton's haunted house story because it really happened to him. And we're going to ask you if you have a ghostly encounter you'd like to share.
We always have an odd one in the crowd.
So it's kind of odd.
Decidedly odd.
Doesn't that strike you as a little bit odd?
No, that doesn't strike me as a little bit odd.
It's the Bob and Sheri Oddcast, with stuff we wouldn't, couldn't, or shouldn't do on the regular show. Now, here's the Oddcast.
All right, so I'm on my Twitter one day, and Clayton slid into my DMs and said, I'm listening to today's podcast about the murder house, and I'd love to tell you all about the haunted house I lived in. So I was all, yes, please. And joining us today on the Oddcast is Clayton. I haven't given your last name just in case, you're trying to maintain some privacy or dignity. Clayton, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, Sheri. It's a pleasure to be on.
So you have a pretty detailed story to tell, and this didn't happen when you were 4 years old. Let's start at the beginning. This was your grandparents' home.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And a lot of freaky stuff has happened on that property for about the last 60 years or so.
So you were living in your grandparents' house while they were in a nursing home. And then you stayed in the house after they both passed away. And the house, and I'll post a picture of it. The house doesn't look like a spooky, gothic, haunted mansion. It looks like a cozy little brick ranch. Is that your dog in the background or the spirits there, Clayton?
That would be my dog, Bella. I told her she couldn't be on the show, so she's a little upset about it.
I think Bella's nervous that we're talking about these dark forces. So, describe what happened during the time that you lived in the house.
Well, we moved in, me and my roommate, we moved in November of 2016, about the week before Thanksgiving. My mom's security guard where she works, he had been living there, and the way everything was set up, there needed to be someone in the family to live in the house. So some family members came to me, asked if I wanted to live there, and I asked a good friend of mine, and he was all for it. And we decided that we would do some renovation work in the process. The house hadn't had anything done to it in about 40 years. So we moved in the week before Thanksgiving. And when we moved in, I'd only been there a handful of times. And there was it wasn't what it used to be, because I'd spent a lot of time growing up there. I was homeschooled, so I was there just about every day after I'd finished my work. And it was a very happy setting growing up there. Now, my grandfather had told me some stories of what happened on the property from years ago before he bought the land. And I just figured it was some creepy ghost stories. But we moved in and cleaned up the place some. The Monday after Thanksgiving of 2016, my grandmother passed away of Alzheimer's. Now, when I went and I visited her on her deathbed, and then she passed away, and we all stayed together. So I go home. Well, they're home, and I fall asleep, and I wake up at about 3:15, which you probably know is the witching hour, to my grandmother standing at the foot of my bed wearing a white gown and looking about 20 years younger. And I had converted a formal living room into a bedroom, and that bedroom was her pride and joy. And so when I opened my eyes and I saw her standing at the foot of my bed, I was speechless. And she was wearing a white gown, and she looked at me and she said, "Clayton, I love you, and thank you for taking care of my home." And I blinked and she was gone. And that was really when some spooky stuff started to happen, was right after that.
Today's Oddcast guest, Clayton, lived in a haunted house. I mean, there was nothing ominous or frightening about that experience, was there, with your grandmother?
That experience right there was
unsettling.
It gave me a sense of comfort.
Yeah.
That she was okay, that she was healed. Now, when we would walk in the house, when my mom's security guard was living there was an ominous feeling as you would walk around through the house. Well, and so I began to experience things after that. I mentioned it to my mom, and I just said, growing up there, did you ever experience anything weird or anything like that? She told me no, she didn't, but she would ask her security guard if he had. So a couple days later, I'm back at her office, and I asked her, I said, did you ask so-and-so about if he had experienced anything in the house? And she said, yeah, I did. And, we had seen that he was sleeping on the couch in the living room and not in the bedroom. And we had both, over the last few months, I thought that was strange when he was living there. We would go and drop stuff off for storage. And we would notice he was sleeping on the couch, not in the bedroom. Well, this was why. He said that he had a dream that he was asleep in his bed, and he opened his eyes and there was a black mass at the doorway. And he was frozen, almost like a sleep paralysis. And as the black mass moved closer to him, it reached out and began to try to choke him. And the security guard couldn't move, and he began to feel the choke. He kept trying to say the name Jesus, Jesus. And each time that he did, the grip got tighter. Finally, as he got the grip, as he said, as he was able to get Jesus out, the grip and the mask went away. My mom looked at him and said, that wasn't a dream, was it? And he just said, I really don't want to talk about it.
Wow. So, I mean, let's wind it back to when your grandparents bought the home. There was something about the land that was unsettling to your grandfather?
Yeah, there was a lot of negative energy that went on that stretch of land. It's on a highway, and even to this day, there's a drug and prostitution problem down that stretch. It's a stretch of highway that goes all the way to Nashville. It goes from Memphis to Nashville, Tennessee, and it was built before the interstate was. So if you wanted to go to Nashville, you took that road. So anything that you wanted to traffic through, whether it was human trafficking or drug trafficking, that was your best route. Now, where he lived was right outside the city limits at the time. And it was originally a farm. And so there was one house on the property, and it was a small white farmhouse, which is still there to this day. And as he bought the farm, there had been a death in the family who owned the farm. The guy had actually hung himself in the barn. They didn't have any explanation why. This was a very nice gentleman, nice farmer, nice old ranch hand, but he had committed suicide and by hanging himself in the barn. And he, after that, and my grandparents moved in, they bought a house near the White House. And then my grandfather's sister built a house in between. Now, during that time, my grandmother had a nervous breakdown, and she was diagnosed with bipolar schizophrenia. She had tried in the house, she had tried to pour boiling water on a baby.
Oh, my gosh.
And she was institutionalized for most of my mom's childhood. And there was a time when she was institutionalized where my grandfather had tried to take his own life too. He was in the house that they had built, which was the house I lived in. And he was getting ready to take his own life. And as he was about to do it, he got a phone call, and it was his best friend. And that conversation changed his mind. But he never forgot about it.
Well, what's troubling about this, Clayton, is when you reached out to me, you said that while you were living in this house, you became seriously depressed and began having suicidal thoughts. which was something you'd never experienced before. It was as though the house had gotten inside you in some way.
It had. There was a darkness that really just lingered over me. My roommate didn't feel it. His girlfriend definitely did. I figured that it was the loss of losing a grandparent and then staying at the house. It got worse as my grandfather passed away. He passed away 8 weeks after she did in January of that following year. And then the same day we found out that my other grandfather was diagnosed with brain cancer, and he passed away about a month later. And so it was 3 very close deaths to me, very closely. And the darkness of the house just seemed to cover me in that, if that's a way to put it.
So
I would be sitting in a downstairs living area, and it would almost be like a black sheet coming over me. And looking over to the rafters, I would have temptations of taking my own life by hanging the same way that the farmer had. Every night when I would go to sleep, I would wake up at the same time every morning, which was around 3 o'clock. And I would feel a presence standing beside my bed. And every time that happened, I would pray, in Jesus' name, if this is not from you, Lord, then I pray that it would go away. And I would pray that about 5 or 6 times, and finally it would go away.
The thing, when you sent me the Zillow listing for the house, I looked at all the pictures and I studied it, and someone listening to this might get the idea that this was a dark or dilapidated or in some way menacing space. It's actually like cozy and bright and filled with daylight. And so when you hear Clayton describe this darkness and this dark feeling, it wasn't the physicality of the house, because that's what Bob would say if he was here. Well, have you thought about opening the drapes? The house itself looks absolutely charming in photos. There was some feeling inside the house, you're saying?
Oh, absolutely. And it really started once my grandparents had moved out of the house. My grandfather was very, very deep in masonry. I don't know if I had mentioned that to you in the DMs, he was of the highest degree.
As a Freemason.
I know there are conspiracy theories and all that, so you can conspire whatever you want to, but he was always very careful about what he mentioned and what he brought into his home.
So when you lived in the house, you were an adult,
That's correct.
After your grandparents were in assisted living. When you would visit the house as a child, were you uncomfortable?
Oh, absolutely not. It was, all of my cousins lived on the property. It was almost like a compound sometimes. I think that there was a joy that was there on that property all the time that really covered up the darkness that had lingered there for so many years before. But once everyone had moved away and had moved out and had started their own lives, and it just sat there, that darkness began to creep back in.
It could reclaim it in a way.
Exactly.
So how long did you live in the house?
I lived there from November of 2016 to March of 2017. So pretty much winter of 2016-17.
And the thing is, my guess is if you had not had so many frightening and unsettling experiences, you might have stayed in the house. I mean, what was the thing that finally made you say, all right, I'm out of here?
It was the fact that I became so uncomfortable with my own mental state. And because my grandfather had passed away in January, the house had gotten put up for sale. And so they were showing the house a lot, and just some other different personal reasons that we felt that it would be best to move out. But once we did, it was like a cloud was lifted off me. But I still felt an attachment to me. I'm a member of a fraternity, and we have a spiritual retreat where they partner with a ministry. And I went to that retreat the following winter, and I shared some of my experiences with the group. and they offered to pray over me. And the leader of the group was really disturbed with what I had experienced. And as he asked me to pray, if he could pray over me, a buddy of mine that works for the national headquarters said, "Clayton, it was like your body language and your face was not you anymore. The thought of being prayed over like that for something to leave you." Now, I'm a Christian. I don't believe that I can be possessed, but what I believe that I did experience was oppression, which is, a dark, demonic entity can influence you and latch on to you and bring you down, but not necessarily possess you. So as they began to pray over me, I felt a burning all over my body like I was being cleansed. And as the prayers got longer and they got stronger and they got deeper, the feeling that I can best describe, and Sheri, you've probably seen this movie before, but Spider-Man 3, when Peter Parker is ripping venom off of him in the bell tower, that felt exactly like that. So, once that was ripped away from me, I never experienced that feeling again.
So question, I was raised, by old country, fresh off the boat, little Italian ladies. So
right.
Catholic, very Catholic, where there is a belief in demonic possession. And of course, everyone is familiar with the idea or the practice of exorcism. But you said that as a Christian, you don't believe you can be possessed. Can you explain that a little bit more? Because I've never had anyone put it that way. And I just want to make sure I understand. Oppression, but not possession. In your faith practice, you can't be possessed.
You accept Jesus into your life, he comes into your heart, and he fills that void. And because Jesus has possession of your soul and of your spirit, nothing can take that away from you. And so that's what I mean by I was not possessed, but there was a feeling of something lingering, something being hovering around me, trying to really get to me.
So clearly when you were in the house, you were very uncomfortable and your behaviors were changing. The way you were thinking was changing. When you would leave the house to go to work, for example, would any of that lift, or did the lines get blurred and eventually you just felt this same kind of awful weight no matter where you were?
Oh, when I had started a new job whenever in the middle of when I was working there. I mean, whenever I was living there, I just started a new job. So the stress of starting a new job plus that, it just became a dangerous combination.
So let me ask you this. This story has a twist ending, worthy of like it's worthy of American Horror Story. But before we get to that, what do you, putting together your experience, your faith, your understanding of physics and the world, what do you think is going on at this property?
I think there is a long history of activity there. I think that long before my grandfather bought the land, long before there was a farm there, it could have been. I don't know. It could be many things.
Well,
location.
If we just look at physics, the idea that matter can't be destroyed, it can only be transformed. Energy, can only be transformed. I mean, is it possible to think maybe that where tragedy has occurred, there's an echo?
Oh, absolutely. I think that.
I mean, do you believe in ghosts?
I believe in angels and demons, and I believe that there are things that we will never be able to understand, and I believe that what we see to the naked eye, I do believe that we miss a lot, and I do believe that there is a spiritual battle every day around us that we can't see.
And maybe there are places in the world where the membrane is so thin that there's leakage. I mean, that's.
Are you saying like almost like a portal?
not a portal, but because I believe, as you do, that there are multiple dimensions to reality, and our senses, our 5 or 6 senses, depending on who you are so very, very limited. I mean, even our ability to perceive light and color is just so limited. So there are multiple dimensions to reality, and maybe in some places those barriers get a little thin and things touch and overlap. And maybe this piece of property is one such place where, as you describe it, there's this war going on between good and evil all around us all the time. And maybe in that little spot in Tennessee, the line has gotten kind of thin and blurred.
Oh, absolutely. I believe that. That's definitely a possibility. And I've always been open to any kind of possibilities. I think that I just know that there are some things that we can never fully comprehend, and there are things that we will never be able to fully explain. Like the experience that I have. I mean, I can't explain. I can't give a logical reason to what I experienced.
So let's fast forward a little bit. You moved out in April of 2017 because your family put the property up for sale. It eventually sold the following summer in July of 2018. So let's talk about what happened to the man who bought the house in July of 2018.
The man that bought the house gutted it. He tore out walls. He renovated the kitchen. He did a lot of things to it that I think were just great. It needed updating. So when the family got word, because we still had a family member that was living a couple houses down on the property. So when we gotten word that they were doing a lot of the great things to the house, we were happy for it. Now my cousin is the district attorney in the area, and we found out that the gentleman who was a retired police officer from another state, he had taken his own life in the downstairs area where I had experienced a lot of darkness, a lot of oppression, a lot of suicidal thoughts. And right beside the bedroom where my grandfather had attempted to take his own life, and also in the same area where my roommate's girlfriend always had a weird feeling and never wanted to walk in that room. And he had the additional, they added on to the house, they added a downstairs living area, and it used to be a back porch, and it was almost like they added another house. So the entryway to it looks like a back door. Well, they took those back door glass doors, and they turned them into windows. And these were double glass. This gentleman shot himself with a handgun. His body went through the double-plated glass window. There's no way that the force of that would have been able to just throw him through storm windows. There's no way, and I think that something threw him out the house along the way.
I'm so shocked by the way that this story, well, it hasn't ended. Clearly, the house is probably going to be back on the market if it hasn't sold again. It's sold again. Yeah, and it is now it's a horse ranch now, and I haven't heard of anything that's happened since. So you're saying that the man who bought the house from your family, a retired police officer from another state, who presumably would have no knowledge, of any of the stories or rumors, took his own life with a handgun, and his body was thrown through a 7-foot-tall double glass window.
That is correct. I also learned that his spouse complained that he had fallen into alcoholism, that his demeanor changed, that his attitude and his personality had some changes too.
So the tragedy, the multiple tragedies associated with this house, what rational explanation can you offer? Do you have one?
I have a theory, and here's what it is, Sheri. Whatever's in that house, whatever resides in the area, it hates change. For 40 years, my grandfather never changed a thing. Actually, for 50 years, he never changed anything. The only thing he added to it was carpet. And when me and my roommate renovated the bathroom, as I began to talk about it now, it makes a lot of sense. Once we began to make a lot of changes was when I began to experience that. So it was like whatever was there didn't want any sort of change. So we would ask my grandfather, do you want to put new carpet in? There are seams in the carpet. Do you want to update the cabinetry? It's cedar. You got to have some changes around here if you ever want to sell the place one day. And he was very, very staunch on never changing anything.
Bob,
not even rearranging furniture.
Clayton, Bob hates change, but I don't see him throwing anyone through a window. I mean, there's something malevolent and unclean here. And it may not be the structure itself, and maybe the land it's sitting on. Have you ever done any research into that piece of property?
I actually have. I had a day off about a year ago where I went to the library, and all of the information, I couldn't find anything before he bought it. There was no purchase and selling history. I couldn't find anything before my grandfather bought the land.
So no, massacre, no, the whole family slaughtered, nothing. It's just
the suicide of the original owner in the barn.
Which, of course, we can have no way of knowing what was happening in that man's life or with his mental health. I mean, tragically, people do take their lives, and in the places where that happens, I think there's a lingering sorrow, but not this malevolence that you're describing necessarily. It's like there's something else here.
Oh, absolutely. When my parents would come and visit me during that winter, they said my mom would leave, and she didn't tell me this later, but she said, we would leave the house and I would look at your dad and say, this doesn't feel like the same house anymore. And my dad said, we would walk in and it was almost like we were walking into darkness.
I had a dear friend. She died. She and her husband, when they were first married, they were looking to buy a house, and they looked at this one house, and it was just incredible. I mean, it was like perfect, beautiful, big porch and gorgeous yard and trees and flowers, and the price was like, what? And the house apparently had been lingering on the market. People had a weird feeling about it. But my friend, she was one of these people that was no nonsense, right? She just shook that off. Don't be crazy. It's just a house. They bought the house. And so many odd things happened. So many things that she could not explain. Their whole marriage went under, which, you don't need the spirit world to do that to you. God knows I know that. But she saw things. They heard things. There were inexplicable things. And she subsequently found out that the previous owner had taken her own life in the master bathroom.
Oh, my gosh.
And there were a lot of odd phenomenon that my friend and her husband experienced around that part of the house. And so they ended up, they had the house blessed, and then they tried smudging, and ultimately they divorced and sold the house. And I have no idea what has happened since in that property. But there are places where when something very tragic and sorrowful or violent has occurred, you feel like there's that lingering energy. And sometimes it's just a feeling, like a little bit of a chill. And sometimes, more rarely, it's what you're describing, where there's a physical presence to it that feels intentional and directed.
Oh, I agree. And I would have tried to invite friends over to come hang out at the house, because this is a huge house. This could be like have a bunch of people over, grill out, have a big bonfire. No one ever wanted to come over. And if they came over, they didn't stay very long because it creeped them out.
Did you have pets in that house?
No, I did not. I've got 2 now, and sometimes it feels like this house is haunted just because they bark at everything.
Well, here's the thing. Like, I'm a firm believer in, sometimes I'll walk into the room and one of my pets will be staring like at a corner with their ears back. And I'm like, oh, not today, Satan, not in this house. I'm a firm believer in trusting an animal's instincts. I'm curious what would have been like if you'd have brought a dog into that house the day.
I'll say this: the dogs that they did have on the property, they didn't last very long because they like to go out and chase cars on the highway.
Wow.
There was a lot of
getting real.
There was a lot of darkness
here.
there.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think for years that was covered up with multiple families living there with a lot of happiness, with a lot of kids. I mean, my grandfather did everything he could to keep everybody happy. There were about pretty much 30 people living on that property between my great-grandparents, my great-aunts, and all their children, and then my grandfather and his children.
So did this experience change the way you think about death or the paranormal, reality?
It did. I mean, I am a sucker for episodes of Ghost Adventures. I think some of that can be exaggerated, but this experience that I have, it became more personal, and especially seeing my grandmother's ghost, it made me a pretty firm believer.
Do you feel that as a result of this, now you're somehow more attuned or more sensitive?
Oh, very, very much so. My wife, she is she has a very strong gift of discernment, and she can always tell if we're somewhere I don't feel comfortable, if there's something wrong with me, or I kind of sense something going on. And there are places that we've gone before where I'm like, we don't need to stay here very long.
And so now you trust that in a way that maybe you didn't
absolutely.
before.
Because when I moved in, I did feel a little bit of that, but I thought, I've always wanted to live here growing up. It's something I've always looked forward to. I'm not going to give this opportunity up.
Wow. So it's a horse ranch now. Are there people living in that house?
Yeah, I actually drove by there last week. My wife she works not too far from there, and so as I dropped off something at her job and I was heading back to my work, I drove by, and there were horses out in the back field. There was a new fence up, and it looked bright. And I mean, I can't explain it. Who knows what's going on behind closed doors? You know, everything could look happy and bright on the outside, but kind of the same way you would see depression. A person looks happy and laughing and bright on the outside, but inside those doors, what you can't see could be something that's dark.
And depending on the person that experiences this, I mean, you had a framework for understanding this. You felt that this was, although you were changing and you were experiencing thoughts of self-harm and depression, you had a way of understanding that this may be outside of yourself. Depending on who experiences this, I mean, this can be the express track to madness.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I no longer fell into depression and suicidal thoughts. I fell into alcoholism, something that I had never even really done before. Smoking and like a freight train to cope with anything, and a lot of behaviors that weren't me, to the point where my roommate told me, he came up to me and said, "Clayton, are you okay? What's going on? I know you're going through a lot, but is there something that you're not telling me?" And instead of accepting that love and care from a friend looking out for me, I lashed out back at him in frustration and anger.
Which is not who you are. And
exactly.
Yet,
I'm a very laid back, go with the flow. It takes a lot to really make me mad.
See, you know what I'm kind of like flashing back to, Clayton, is the experience that Ronald Defoe reported having in the house that became the subject, DeFeo, became the subject of the Amityville Horror. He felt himself changing. He knew that these behaviors and these thoughts were not him, but this was what he thought and what he felt. And there is a very, really uncomfortable similarity to what you're describing. I mean, there are people that just don't believe it, and that's fine. Live your best life. But you lived it, and you can't account for this. You have no explanation for what you saw and felt and heard. And
absolutely not. And when I tell my story, there are some people who get engrossed in it. I had one guy who's like, "Oh, let's take me to the house. I want to see it." And then there are people who just think it's a bunch of baloney.
Well, no matter what anybody else thinks, you lived it. You know what you experienced. And I think that anyone listening to this would agree that it has changed you forever.
It has. I'll never look at that house. The relationship I had with my grandparents, I'll never look at it the same way again without reverting back to my time living there.
Wow. Well,
it affected friendships. A friendship of mine was pretty much destroyed due to I guess you would say would be a one-night stand, and a drunken one-night stand, and which was totally out of the behavior for me, something that I never thought I would ever do or try to do, and it destroyed it. And relationships, friendships were destroyed. Me and my wife, we had been broken up. We weren't talking, so I was suffering the loss of that. I was suffering the loss of 3 close family members. I was suffering the loss of a job from the year before. I had worked in ministry and had a poor experience, and I left and had such an anger towards the church. So a lot of negative energy that really just opened me up for that to come in.
And what's shocking to me as we wrap up, I guess, is that all of these things you're describing were not you before or after this house. It's like someone was wearing your skin. Do you know?
Yeah, and that's what it was. When I look back to that time, to that winter, it's just, I think, like, was that really me?
Well, to use your earlier description, you under the weight of a force that none of us can really explain or understand. And thank God you got out when you did.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And what's so scary is that there are times when I have driven by that I long to go back. I have moments where I think I want to go back. I want to go back to that. And I have to pull myself out. Wow,
you feel called back to that space. Stay away, Clayton. Stay away.
I don't enter the property or anything. I just stay away from it.
Stay away. Do not be like the white people in scary movies that go, "Is that a haunted basement?" And then they head down the stairs. You know there's something wrong with that place. Don't go anywhere near that place.
I wouldn't dream of it.
Well, I am so glad that you had time to join us on the Oddcast to talk about that, because it's really hard to argue with someone as level and as faithful and as straight up as you, who's describing an experience that makes no rational sense. And I'm just so thankful that you're out of it. And so sorry for everything that happened before and after.
And it's an experience that I use as a testimony, really, to rely on Christ in all things. During a time where I fell to darkness, I fell and leaned on alcohol and cigarettes and lust and making money and trying to fill a void of darkness.
And that's what that kind of darkness eats. Man, that darkness, that is its Taco Bell. Any kind of depravity, any kind of selfishness, any kind of self-harm, that is what, if you had to come up with one explanation for what that darkness is, it's the darkness of selfishness and self-destruction. And
I absolutely agree.
And thank God you're safe. Well, Clayton, stay in the light, brother. Stay in the light and stay away from that charming, freshly renovated 4-bedroom, 2-brick ranch on all that property, because something just ain't right there. All right, our little haunteds. We want to hear your ghost story. Don't worry about being mocked or disbelieved. We're going to hear you with a fully open mind. You can shoot us a talkback on the free Bob and Sheri app. You can shoot us an email at hello@bobandsheri.com. You can give us a call at 844-52-SHERI. And if you're bashful and don't want to tell your story yourself like Clayton did, we're happy to tell it for you because we believe you. And we'll see you on the next Oddcast.